Hello friends, I'm here today with my May wrap-up. May was a really good reading month and a kind of strange personal month. I was sick for about 2 weeks, so really I was just kind of wandering in this haze of sickness and pajamas. Anyway, we're here to talk about books. Let's see how I did compared to my May TBR. So I didn't read everything that was on my TBR, but I did read 10 things this month. The breakdown of those 10 things is 1 nonfiction book, 1 adult fiction book, 1 graphic novel, 1 middle grade book, and 1 classic children's book, and 5 young adult / new adult books. I struggled really hard with the YA NA books that I picked up this month. I love reading YA and I will always defend it, and one of the main reasons why is that there's a sort of emotional complexity that you can get away with when your characters are in that age range. It's like an accepted notion that these are the ages for finding yourself and feeling things really deeply. Unfortunately, I feel a little bit burnt out on YA recently, and I don't know if that's because I've picked up some really popular and hyped up things. That all said, this is what I read specifically in the month of May. First, I have Soon I Will Be Invincible by Austin Grossman. This is a story told from dual perspective. One is a supervillain who recently broke out of prison, and one is a recently made hero who joins like an Avengers type hero group. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars because I found it incredibly charming. I love the dual perspective in the way that it ended kind of inevitably, but you were hoping against hope that maybe it would end in a different way. Some parts in the middle dragged a little bit, but only because Grossman really worked on pushing home certain characteristics of the main characters' personalities. So it felt a wee bit repetitive right through the middle. Still, it was a really enjoyable experience, and I appreciate the complex characters that Grossman gave us through this novel. Next, I read Miss Marvel #1, No Normal. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I read a decent amount of reviews on it that had really kind of 2 main gripes with this. The first is that the origin story is kind of generic, and the second is about the stereotypes that are used to portray Kamala's family. By virtue of it being a Muslim American girl going through the origin story, I think it really stepped up from generic. I found so much honesty in her family because I related a lot to it. Her parents reminded me some of my parents, and her identity struggle with being a minority just really related to some of my struggle at that age. So I found it super honest, much more so than stereotypical. Next up is Wonder by RJ Palacio. I had every intention of participating in middle grade May, and what ended up happening is that I read 1 middle grade book in May. The good news is that I love this one thing that I read, and I also gave it 4 out of 5 stars. We have this running joke over on Snark Squad about how you know you're getting older when you watch teen shows and relate more to the parents. The same struggle applies over to books. I read this story. I love the main character Augie to pieces, but I found myself and my heart going out to the parents in this story. And more than that, just I really appreciated the family dynamic. Wonder follows the story of Augie, who was born with a facial deformity and is going to be going to school, public school, for the first time in his whole entire life. It is told in multiple points of view, so we get not only Augie's point of view from, people looking at him, how people react to him, how people treat him, but then we also switch and we get people's point of view of him. I objectively rated it 4 out of 5 stars because it is a middle grade book and it takes that message that it has and it's a little bit pushy with it, not very subtle at all. The ending is a little bit neat and happily ever after, which is a bit strange when you consider what Augie went through the course of the book, but I really did appreciate it. I loved it with my feelings, even if I could stand back and see some places where this might disconnect with an adult reader. Next, I did another buddy read with Leia at Hi I Love Books, and we read Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. I mistakenly thought that there's another book on this list that was my first 1-star read, but actually this was my first 1-star read of the year. It was really lovely to read along with Leia because at one point we were just sending each other emails of all of the ridiculous lines that we found. Look, I love flowery writing. It's like one of my favorite things ever to encounter within literature, and I often talk about how simple language drags down a book for me. However, there is a difference between flowery for the purposes of enhancing the story and the characters and just a hot, stinking word mess. At first, the language helped us understand Juliet's disconnection from the world, and then it just got out of hand. And then I started thinking about how if Homegirl's so disconnected, then this romance that is truly, like, the entire plot of the book is kind of gross. How much is she consenting when she can't really process reality correctly? And how am I supposed to focus on the romance when I can't understand half of what she's trying to say? This book is really less about whatever bare bones dystopian world that it is set in and whatever superpowers that Juliet has, and more about the three main males that we meet all lust over Juliet, because she may be disconnected from reality, but boy, she sure is hot. Every time she touches Adam, there are sparks exploding, and I don't know, I think they take some like fully clothed showers. I am not sure why. I am not a fan, and I only finished because it was a buddy read and Leia was so wonderful about encouraging me to make it to the end of the book. We laughed and we laughed about how nothing happened. This was basically a sexless YA book where everything that happened in the background served to prop up a because of reasons romance. Next, I read The Little Prince. One of my very good friends, Jane, called this literary magic sprinkle, and that is basically the best way that I can describe this book. It is just literary magic sprinkles. Next, I read The Monstrumologist by Rick Yancey. I heard really wonderful things about this from Teller of Tales, who recently finished up book 3 and 4, I believe. The Monstrumologist follows the story of Will Henry, who is an orphan and apprentice to a doctor who works on monsters. One night, a grave robber brings in the body of a monster, which sets off a chain of events that is both thrilling and disgusting. I mentioned this in my May TBR video, but this book is so vivid and gross. It's a true monster book in that it has like all of the gross parts and blood and stuff, and also that the monsters are mean and they're bad. It's not that they're evil, it's that they're predators. And I really like that about this book, is that it truly showed the monsters as predators and not just like some evil entity. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. My TBR pick for last month was to finish the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, and I did not. I did reread Daughter of Smoke and Bone, which is the first book, and I was pretty happy with that. During my first read, I gave this 4.5 stars, and I think that more or less holds after a reread, which was really surprising and really pleasant after my struggle with YA this month. Next, I finished A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I cannot even begin to wrap up my hatred of 90% of everything that happened in this book. My copy is marked up to about page 90, and then I just stopped because it wasn't even fun anymore to notice the things that were wrong, because it was wrong on every page. I wasn't going to do a standalone review of this originally because I just did one for Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and I acknowledge that there is a line between being critical and being hateful, and I want to be careful of not crossing that line. However, there is just so much bad stuff in this novel that is reflective of the bad stuff that we've come to accept in YA. I'm going to give you some space between my review for Throne of Glass and what I will do with A Court of Thorns and Roses. 1 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Women in Front of the Sun by Judith Ortiz Cofer. Sophia, whose channel I will link below, reached out to me on Twitter about possibly reading some more Latino literature. One of my favorite things to encounter when I'm reading is pieces of my own heritage and my own experience growing up. For so much of my childhood, it really felt like nobody would understand the smallest things, from why there are always pots in the oven if you go to my mother's house, to the struggle of growing up with a distinctly Hispanic name. In this book, Cofer tells us about how she became a writer and her growing love affair with words. It's a super short and easy read. I really loved the first half of the book, which kind of tells these little stories about her growing up, and they're all connected by this thread where you see, I do see where her love of reading and writing and why she became a writer really shows through these little anecdotes of her growing up. This is one of those books that I'm going to put together with all of the things that I keep for inspiration and creativity, because I absolutely see myself rereading this. Lastly, I read Mosquitoland by David Arnold. This one was a little bit hard to rate for me because it took in my emotions and it made me feel things, but mostly it was like, ew, stop, that it made me feel. So I want to give it points for at least involving my emotions, but at the same time, it just kind of misconnected for me. And in general, I felt like the author was trying too hard and pushing too much. Everyone that the main character met as she was on this road trip, going from where she's living with her father to where she lived with her mother before the divorce. So everyone she meets on this whole road trip is basically a little bit neurotic and quirky. And like everybody, it's like quirky and neurotic, where it just one after the other, and it started to feel really, really contrived. The writing was really nice. There were moments that really made me chuckle and things that I felt were written really clearly and really described what Mim was going through and her own emotions, but for the most part, it was just a little bit too contrived for my taste. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. So that's it. Those are all of the books that I read in May. Let me know if you've read any of these on my list. What you guys do if you're feeling a little bit of YA burnout. I'm trying to kind of mix up my reading with other things from different genres, or if you have anything that you felt was really fresh that might appeal to me, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. I mistakenly thought that there's another book on this list that was my first. And that's it. Those are all of the books that I read in May. I am not picking out a... That's the wrong video. Goodness.